All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Commander Snuggles, and I'd like to introduce you to another session of Endgame, brought to you by Psych, Hoplo, and our special guest, Tunsids. Tonight, we're talking about biology, technology. Have a good one and enjoy.
Yay!
Awesome!
Thank you, Commander Snuggles.
Nice.
That was awesome. Yay! Welcome,
Appreciate
everyone.
it. Yeah, hi, welcome.
Yes, thank you guys for fighting through all the glitches. Tonight we're having some glitches
Yeah.
from VRChat, which haven't been the worst glitches ever, but you know. And yeah, we have a special guest is Jeremy or Toomses, who is we basically know each other. So one additional disclaimer that I think I just want to add in here is that we know each other from the National Institutes of Health in the United States, which is kind of the main body of kind of the health service of the U.S. But
largest,
in this, there you go.
oh, this is the largest clinical research facility in the world.
Yes. Oh, wow.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
just to clarify, though, I just want to say that when we're talking tonight, none of what Jeremy is saying represents the National Institutes of Health or their views or anything like that. It's all just kind of, personal.
Just Jeremy.
Yeah.
He just represents
Definitely, yeah,
It's
just my
Jeremy
opinion.
representing
Yep,
Jeremy.
my opinion.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
And
So, but yeah, that being set aside, yeah, you've been very active in the VR world at NIH. We met when we formed the virtual reality interest group there, and you've been very active with 3D modeling and 3D models and things. So maybe could you just start off by just giving a little background about
sure.
Yeah, how you got into this space and what you're doing now.
Yeah, okay. Thanks so much, Noah. I mean, Noah's just awesome. He came and gave a talk to our virtual and augmented reality interest group last week, and it was like a packed house. We had about 30 people in this conference room. It was crazy, standing room only almost. So, yeah, thank you so much. It was really an awesome talk. So, yeah, I've been working at the NIH for about 13 years. I started out as a fellow, a post-bac fellow, just like Noah, and
nice.
and then I converted over to a contractor, and I've been supporting scientists there in the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development for like the last 13 years. And but before that, I was like, I have my bachelor's degree in it's actually interdisciplinary studies in art and biology. So I took a lot of art classes, took a lot of biology classes, and then kind of like merged the two. Yeah, I love art. It's like sometimes you
What is Endgame VR?
Okay, I just sent you.
Oh, like biotechnology, I like some of that, like, that was interesting.
Ride, or it'll take or different modifiers and add them to a protein that might give it like a unique advantage as a marker on the outside of a cell, so that it can identify itself to the immune system or something. Anyway, so what this does here, this protein, it
Which part is
basically
the
adds a
protein?
lipid. So
Here, you
This is
can
libany
like
part, right?
we have some markers
yeah,
if you
exactly.
want to like circle
Yeah,
or anything.
Oh yeah, yeah. Here, use the markers if
yeah,
you
I
need.
forgot I
Here,
can move around them.
There's more colors.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Oh, so yeah, so here's the protein. And actually, I think we have like even better than that. We can show you a 3D protein. Is there an
Yes.
eraser?
Should I?
Sure.
Oh, if you use the back part of it, you can erase it like
cool.
that, or you can click to the back part of it to erase all of the green.
Cool.
And also, I see that
Awesome.
I don't know if we mentioned this in the announcements, that if you have questions or comments, you can line up in the middle and things like that. I see Pika, you're in the middle with a question or comment. So once we're at a point where we can
Let's
get
let's
the
do a
3D
couple
model.
comments and
Yeah,
then we
sure.
can show them
Yeah,
the
here.
3D model.
Maybe Pika.
I didn't mean to.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
Sure.
It's great.
Pika?
Yo,
Pika.
I love bio, mechanical chemistry. I've probably seen a lot of these videos, but there's one thing that I just don't understand. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have the RNA come out of the nucleus, and then the machinery comes up, and then it matches the nucleotides to the RNA, and then it makes the actual protein. Like, how does it just looks like every single simulation I've ever seen, it's always like the nucleotides, they just kind of like flow in, and they just
right.
snap right in. Like, how does that
right. I know.
actually, like, how do
okay.
things get from one thing to another? Like, do the nucleotides just is it a magnetic pull? Like, how does one not go in the other? Is it all just random chance?
Yeah, it basically is. So I had that exact same question, and I asked my this professor. He was my professor for advanced cell biology, and that class was crazy. There were like 300 people in it, and like 2 people got an A, maybe like I don't know, like so many, half the class failed basically. And but I was like, so I used to bug this guy all the time, like about 3D protein modeling programs and stuff, and I asked him, I was like, how does it all fit into place? And so I think part of what you're describing is from, if you look at animations of the stuff, then it's like all the amino acids just kind of go in just like clockwork, and it's like, how the hell? But that's because they created this animation, and they just kind of keyframe it all to be in the right place at the right time. But in the actual cell, it's at such a small scale, and that there are so many of these amino acids and stuff, because so here we have the Golgi apparatus. There's also the giant endoplasmic reticulum and all these vesicles. So a lot of proteins that get made are just crap, and they get sent to be broken down in lysosomes, and so that recycles all the amino acids and puts them back where they need to be used.
By what? Like, you say sent, but that seems like it's an executive decision.
Right. No. So they're sent in the sense that
it's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, there's
random.
diffusion though. Diffusion is very strong. If you put a drop of food coloring in a glass of water, it diffuses through there really fast, right? Now think about if you're talking on the scale of a little tiny cell. Basically you could have like 3 3 or 4 little amino acids, and they're kind of like everywhere at the same time because they're moving around so fast that it's just like it's insane. So I think
but that's part of the challenge of scientific illustration and
Right.
you know, science communication in general. I think is illustrating and describing these things in a way that's accurate and like facilitates people's understanding and possibly prompts more questions, which is good. But
I have another question, because like every single rendition that I've ever seen of like a cell, like inner workings, I mean, you're talking about like on the scale of like, especially when you get into DNA, you're talking about like atoms, basically, like single chains of atoms, like in a line. It's a really small scale, but all other like non-important things that for the demonstration are just like equated out, like subtracted out. Like, so how much more stuff? How much of that, like all of the molecules of the water, all the molecules of the salt, all the molecules of just the random shit, like. How much is that equating to the actual movement of everything?
All right. Okay. Thanks, Pico. I think we get the question. And
so 2 really good points. So one thing that you're saying is that like the way that it's described visually, like by a lot of these animations, sometimes can be misleading because you're only seeing the most important things. You're not seeing like all the other random crazy stuff. Like, because if you pack everything that's really in a cell into the cell, you wouldn't be able to see anything because there'd be so much noise and so many molecules. So what you're seeing is really a extreme simplification of what's actually there. Now, 2 things. One is David Goodsell. He does all the graphics for the protein data bank. The protein data bank is this database of every protein that that's been crystallized and solved, and people publish to it. But they have this molecule of the month series and a bunch of other educational materials, and one of them is like a poster that shows DNA, and you see like the size of the DNA, and then you see the size of like the ribosome and like a water molecule, and like the size of a virus and the size of all these other things. And so that's really kind of when you see them all like next to each other, it does give you like a better sense of how they all exist in 3D space. And then there are other animators that have actually shown every single, like the entire soup of molecules that we're talking about here. And when you see it all together in a molecular animation, when it's because there are certain applications that will model that, but it's really hard to just get like one, like they used a supercomputer about, I don't know, 15 years ago, just to simulate the ribosome, one ribosome in in real time, and it took like the biggest supercomputer in the world to do that. So to try to create a 3D animation where you're kind of creating it all visually, it's just so much more involved. And so what they really kind of break it down and show the most important things. But there are simulations with you can add hundreds of different molecules and let it run and see how it goes.
And I guess I don't know if anyone here has tried Neos the Universe. It was like an old DK2 demo or anything like that. It was like you start off on the molecules, and then you go up to like the size of the universe, but you go through countries and Paris and dinosaurs or whatever.
Cool.
It was really cool.
But
it's sorry. What were you saying? You tried it. Yeah, and like the basically, it was really cool. But it's interesting because what you're saying is that to accurately simulate some of the stuff that's happening on the molecular level, you need like a supercomputer. So clearly there's this kind of difference between science communication, where you come away from a gestalt understanding of what like an overall understanding of what these mechanisms, what's happening with these mechanisms, versus actually accurately, and that's kind of what Pika's question was about, accurately representing what's actually happening, the randomness, the kind of disorganization and chaos that happens in the cellular level. I also want to make sure that we're I'm kind of familiar with proteins and ribosomes and things like that, but I think we have a very diverse audience here. So make sure also that we're explaining the significance and interaction of these things to, so that's another, I mean, I don't really know, proteins I'm vaguely familiar with and stuff, but
see that for just a second?
Sure, I could figure out the button.
So.
If you click it, it just...
Oh, you can click with the other hand. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Good UI,
okay, Now let's.
Nice.
Can we show 3D?
Before we get to your question, yeah, let's do
Yeah,
one
let's
of
just
your
show the
3D
protein
models.
because that way. I'm sorry, Catapult. I'm really interested in your question. I just really.
No problem.
I think that on the protein question, on like just knowing what
Like, what do they
proteins are,
do? Yeah,
we have
where
like
are
kind of a cool little
they?
show and tell here. So.
Okay, so you might want to step back just a bit,
nice.
Catapult.
Yeah, look.
Hello. Okay.
So this is like a protein. This is like if you were to look at all those amino acids, they have a static electric
Cool.
charge, and so when so
A
normally
fluffy
you have
cloud.
like your DNA, right? I know I just deleted all that DNA, and here I'm drawing it again. But so you have your DNA, and this codes for like this is one thing, this is another thing, this is another thing, and then it creates a
here's different
messenger
things.
RNA.
Now
There's a
tell me
messenger
when
RNA
to-
that's based on this that goes
tell
and
me when
gets
to
like
toggle the.
yeah,
Toons,
go
just
ahead
tell
and
me when to toggle the
talk.
thing. Should I
Can
do
you
it?
go ahead and toggle
Oh,
the ribbon
Helix
structure?
in here.
So this is just like the ribbon
Sheets.
structure. So this is a
Now,
representation of all
can
these
you-
amino acids that
So,
are
but
all
what was the other stuff
and-
then?
the other stuff. So this is the messenger RNA. The messenger RNA goes to a ribosome, and then that produces a 3D.
Sorry, I mean the other stuff on the
Oh,
model. So
Oh,
like
okay,
it
yeah,
was,
so-
it was surrounded by all this
so
lumpy stuff.
yeah. So you see here the spirally stuff and this one thing that's all connected together. This is that's the protein itself, and then this one binds two zinc atoms. So you see these three gold parts right there. Those have just the right
zinc.
charge to attract a zinc molecule, and that's this guy right there. And this
That-
other one here.
Plus 2 or plus 3? Yeah.
I don't know.
Man.
I'm not a chemist or a
Physicist.
physicist, but these guys
Okay,
are
so
kind of like
when
that
I
I work
turn
with to make this our physicists.
When I turn this back
And then-
on, what
what
is
is
this?
Yeah,
this?
so-
What is this outside
So you can
of
see
it?
this little pocket in here, right? So this is like if
Oh,
you were
wow.
to model the electrostatic charge. So before we were looking at the ribbon structure, and that's just a simple representation that shows. So you can, because if you just looked at the outside of it, and if you looked at it with an electron microscope, this is what you would see. Because you
Okay.
just see the very outside of it. And
So we can't see
and
the
so
internal
this outside
structure of the
shape is
protein.
right.
So
That's
this
why we
is
use
one
two
protein.
representations.
This is one
Yeah.
protein. And what,
Yes.
what is the utility of proteins exactly? How do they relate to well, first of all, also,
So-
can you DNA and things like that express, obviously we have these phenotypes, so like who we are as humans
Right.
is we're made up of DNA, and then we have proteins, and how do proteins interface with the DNA, like, yeah. Can you
Yeah, so
briefly
proteins
explain?
are like they're like the parts of a car. They're parts of your body. They make up every part of your body. Not every part, but like a lot of pretty important parts. Like your bones, have they're all made up of these tiny little components of that are like proteins mixed with some other sometimes you have fats and vitamins and all I know there's a whole soup of things. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but so this
that's
is a
okay.
lipid. So let me show you over here. So if you think of a protein as just serving a function, this thing basically takes these are proteins here, and this is another protein, and this protein's job is to put a lipid and onto this thing right
Oh.
here. And so
We
what
have an
this
example
does
of a
is it makes
lipid
it affiliate.
to-
It affiliates
Right, when you-
with the membrane. Actually, so what you have, if you could load up that other model, it's actually one of these things. It's a bilipid. And this is like so membranes like right over here, like the greens, these green things, they have, these are like a fat, the outside is, likes water a lot, and the
Okay.
inside hates water.
Right,
So
right.
this part is hydrophilic, and this part's hydrophobic. And because of that, it ends up kind of creating this separation between things. So you could have like an outside of a cell and an inside of a cell. And the reason that there's a separation is because of this bilipid membrane. So it forms a very important structure
Is that the only force
that helps to separate different things.
Is that the only force that makes up the structure of this membrane?
Well, so that's a great question. So there are a lot of other things that get embedded in, like these proteins, like this protein right here,
Mhm.
but also cholesterol like if you add cholesterol to this, it makes it stiffer. So this is somewhere in between like being a liquid and being a solid, and so because it's in that phase in between, it has a semi permeability. So water can't really get through here. Well, I guess actually I shouldn't say that. I think there are certain water can sometimes pass through, but there are certain channels and pores in these things that will let water in and out. So the cell has some control, and like your muscles do this. They let potassium and calcium in and create like a charge across your muscle cell, so that when a nerve says, "Hey, it's time to go," then it sends a signal and makes your arm move or whatever.
Okay.
So I'm probably oversimplifying.
Well, no. So I guess
so I'm sorry.
trying to.
But so
Sure,
I
yeah.
try to do here is to
Wait, did
show
that
it in
work?
context. I think so. He said it was. I think it's. I'm
So
not sure actually. So they put it on the cover of our annual report, but I don't know if he used it on a journal
So
cover.
I just want to get an assessment of the crowd here. How many people are familiar with like what the role of a protein is in the body? I would say I'm not that familiar with it, but I'm just curious what a thumbs up or thumbs down if you understand.
Oh yeah,
the
let's do
full, like,
emojis. Yeah, thumbs
like
up
the
if you
role.
tutorials. There's this.
I'm a troll,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm not that good of a troll.
I know, right? I'm like, oh, it's just trolling me. But yeah, Catapult, what was your question or comment?
Well, it's basically there's a free program both on Steam and on Oculus. It's called the Body VR.
Oh yeah,
and it's basically going through the bloodstream. You're in a cell, I guess, and go through the bloodstream,
Yeah.
and then you see various. I haven't done it in quite a while, but it's actually quite good. I just
Yeah,
wondering if
so-
you know the people that did this.
I don't know them actually. No, I saw that,
Okay.
and yeah, you know, I've even like used it in some demos and stuff. I mean, I thought it was okay. You know, of course, like for me, I'm kind of like, I don't mean to be a snob when it comes to like animation or you know, but I guess when you start watching some of the Drew Barry stuff, you start getting like, well, you know, that's just that bilipid membrane is oversimplified. You know,
It's less realistic.
But
Yeah, what we were talking about before. It sounds communicate. It's like kind of realism versus communication.
Right.
It's like if you
And
read
I
it,
understand
like,
why they
this
did
is
it like that.
overwhelming. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like this one who doesn't know any of the parts. Yeah, so it's a quite. It's
And
a kind of a balance.
this is, I mean, I
A
hope you
cartoon,
guys
you
like
said,
it and
yeah.
everything. I don't mean to be critical of my own work, but it could be like a lot better. You know, it I guess it is what it is.
Well,
You can only
yeah, I
you
think
can only
that's
spend
just-
so much time. It's like an
Yeah,
endless
art
hole
is-
sometimes where you can like.
Art is never really finished, for sure.
Exactly.
How long did this
That's
take you to
exactly.
make?
Oh, like a couple weeks, I guess. You know, of like
Wow.
kind of working on it here and there. You know, it's probably too much time. I mean, I you know, I do a lot of different things. Like I wear a lot of hats where I work, so it's like I can't just like clear my schedule and work on the graphics. So it's like I
But
do a
it's
little bit here and
3D.
there, but yeah.
Right,
So
we're seeing
I
a
did
2D
it all in
representation
Blender.
of it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. So VR is kind of enabling this return. Like basically, it sounds like before you were doing 3D models or for like these 2D textbooks or representations or
Right.
journal articles, which is like a 2D representation. But all of a sudden, VR, and I think just thinking about the future of like, you know, what is the power
Right.
of the field that you're in? All of a sudden, we're able to have in the center of the room, we're all immersed in this context, and we have the actual thing that you worked so hard on that's only
Yeah.
represented in 2D on this picture floating in front of us that we can walk through. It
Exactly.
seems like it's a really powerful paradigm change to have
Yep.
this in front of us versus the 2D picture. So
Yeah.
do you see education changing and things like that as a result of, or like where do you see this kind of like, I guess, going or the
Yeah, no, I
implications
think
of
I think you're exactly right. It's going to change education, but you know, there's this is great for a more sophisticated level, but I think that there's also a lot of room to grow at the more basic level. So what I'd mentioned before, if you don't mind, let me grab that pen here. So you mentioned the what is it, body VR? That one was pretty cool. And there are some other apps for looking at some of these things in 3D. But this was just created using something called Chimera, and I'm gonna just write it because there's a free version of this and it has a VR mode.
Oh.
It's called Chimera X. So there's a regular Chimera, which is just desktop only. But if you get the X version, and you go in there and you have to type VR on, and you can load up any 3D model. Or any like it takes not any 3D model, but like X3D or I think it'll open other formats as well. And you can also, if you go to pdb.org, pdb.org.
Is that PDP? Like,
yeah, I can be your scribe because I can.
Protein Data Bank. Yeah, I'm sorry, I write like a fifth grader.
well,
maybe
writing in VR is a skill.
I mean,
some
like a
people
doctor.
are really good at it.
You're right. Yeah.
Sure.
So PDB,
yeah.
it's a protein data bank, and basically,
nice.
if you
Okay.
solve, so in order to, so say you have a protein like this, and you want to see what the 3D structure of it is, well, you have to get them to crystallize, and then you can shoot it with an X-ray and create a diffraction pattern. It's all real simple. No, I'm
Oh
kidding.
yeah, it sounds
No, I don't know how
simple.
they.
I could do
I
that.
still don't understand how they figured this all out, but
do that
it's
in my basement.
crazy cool stuff. Oh, Chimera is CH.
Hey, can I?
Oh,
This is a CH.
sorry. Oh, I just erased the whole thing. Oops.
Can I ask you? Well, he's.
Sorry,
I don't know if you want to write that out. Can I ask you if you VR is really taken off. 3D modeling is I think I don't know. It's really good right now. I'm really excited about it. Is there any particular project that you like is your dream project that you would want to be involved in when it comes to this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. Geez, so I'm like, I guess, I think about like, so actually there is a dream project. So I really love, as much as I love VR, we were talking about all the privacy issues and all, you don't know what kind of data could get collected from your, using Unity or from using Steam or whatever else. And so I really like open source a lot. So if you're asking me about a dream project, my dream project would be using X3D to create an open source tool that anybody could like load up all the models and invite other people and like something like a VRChat or something. But and I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are other people that are pursuing the same thing. But I think that actually, if you're not aware of it, it's called X3D. And there's something called
format?
Yeah, so it's both a format and a runtime. So you can actually use this for Web 3D. And actually, one of the scientists that I work with, he has this zebrafish brain browser. And it's let me write it out. It's
what does that mean?
So
just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Poplafone, maybe you want to turn that out so people can see the stage.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Catapult.
No zebrafish, or actually, brain.
Brain browser. No, is
Can
that
you
what
use
it sounds like?
a different color? I can't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can we turn off the background?
Let me write it over.
Doesn't help.
Endgame.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Hello.
Well, you might want to move the camera then. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Sorry.
I'm messaging over Discord.
I can also send out notes afterwards, but
Wait,
maybe that's not as good.
Ghoster.
Okay. I'm gonna go place the bot, and then I gotta leave.
Yep. Do that, please.
I was told my friend was here, but he doesn't seem to be
anyway,
here.
It's... Oh.
Hey.
Right.
So yeah, we can send out notes too as well.
Yeah.
This is stuff we can type out in the link.
Yeah.
YouTube.
But what it is basically if you go there, you can see they take they have these crazy awesome microscopes. They're like $500,000 for like a microscope that shoots the images at the most amazing quality, and they can image a 3D image of like a zebrafish brain, and then they can express all these different genes in the brain, and so a lot of scientists work with zebrafish because they're clear when they're tiny little eggs, and now they've created genetic lines called the Casper line, and so they're clear when they're adults as well, and so they can actually take real-time pictures of like neurons being activated and seeing everything in real time, and
cool.
so what they've done is one of the scientists I worked with created this zebrafish brain browser that lets you look at the it's zbbrowser.com is the address for that.
I'll write that. Oh, I just erased it.
Thank you.
No, okay, but all right, zbbrowser.com.
What's so cool about that is that you can not only can you turn on and off like over 300 different lines of data, but then you can you see 4 quadrants, and one of the quadrants is actually 3-dimensional, so you can rotate it around in the browser, and then there's a VR button. If you hit the VR button and if you're looking at it on a smartphone, you can use Google Cardboard to see it all in virtual reality, and that's all enabled through X3D. So anybody who's got a Vive, I don't know if you've ever tried Web 3D, but there are a bunch of demos for it. But basically, it only works with certain browsers. Like I think it might work with like a test version of Firefox, or maybe it's just any Firefox browser or
Most
test version of
Firefoxes
Chrome.
can do WebVR if WebVR is what you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. So, and then you WebVR and it just launches into it like automatically, and it's yeah, it's so easy to use. So I could definitely see that being
That's
like the future.
I have a question. Yeah.
But the zbbrowser.com is not a valid URL, or at least I'm not getting a connection to that.
Can you do a Google search for this Zebra Brain browser and see if it?
Yes,
it should
I
just
came
be
up with
Z
the National Institute of Health site.
browser.
That's what I wrote out. Yeah.
.com.
zbbrowser.com.
Maybe Google it and then.
He said he did, and it took him to a NIH website.
Oh.
I don't know.
That's probably
it should redirect. It should redirect to a.
Did you find it out, boy?
No. I was just gonna say we can probably look it up and share it in the Endgame Discord.
Yeah. Let's go. Okay. Yeah, we can do endgamevr.com, and you can join the Discord, and then we can kind of show these links.
I'll do that.
Awesome.
But I had a question. So you mentioned Casper. Here, let's just erase the. Yeah. You mentioned Casper, and that reminded me of CRISPR, which I don't know if people have seen in the news. That China. So a couple things happened. One is that China reportedly had the first genetically engineered baby, or they created I actually don't know too much of the details, but they created a genetically engineered embryo, or like that will become a baby, and they're basically experimenting it.
No, so the lady actually gave birth, and it was a scientist who was kind of I don't know what. It was kind of, everybody thinks it's unethical. In fact, NIH just, I don't want to speak for them, but they communicated their displeasure with the fact that it happened. They were really negative about it.
Yeah, the co-inventor of CRISPR also
came out against it.
Came out against it. So one, could you explain very briefly what CRISPR is, and two, how does that fit into kind of what we've been talking about proteins and all that? Like what is the implication of the fact that this has happened in our society and things like that?
Yeah, so it's a pretty in-depth. So I'm definitely going to oversimplify whatever I talk about. So take it all, please, with a grain of salt. I'm not a geneticist or anything, but I will say that so the doctor, it sounds like he sought out somebody with it was a man with HIV and a woman who did not have HIV. And they wanted to be able to have a baby that did not have HIV. So they must have used CRISPR on his sperm in order to make it, or in order to not have, what is it? It's like DDR. No, I think DDR5 is like it's like CCR5 or
Dance Revolution.
The
oh, shoot. Yeah, the gene. They turned off this gene that's like a spike on on the white blood cells that the HIV attacks. So they basically removed this thing so that it couldn't
using CRISPR.
So that it would be immune to HIV. And
so
using CRISPR. So what CRISPR allows them to do is editing. Yeah.
So my understanding is it allows them to edit the actual genes, right? The actual DNA. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so what they're saying is this did not need to be done. For one, there are ways that they could have just had intercourse and produced a baby, and then she could have taken antivirals while carrying the baby, and they could have had the baby without it transmitting HIV. So it was kind of like an artificial construct for doing this experiment. And I think that he just really wanted to do the experiment. And so they say it's unethical because of both the environmental and psychological dangers. For one, if the children end up having babies, having had CRISPR performed on them, how could that affect the babies? So and then is that an ethical thing to do, even for them to do that? And then also the psychological impact. They're going to grow up being the children of they're the first CRISPR edited babies in the world. So what could that do to them psychologically? So from an ethical perspective, it was really a poor decision to have done it.
But it's interesting because now it's the editing. So I think, when we bring up these 3D models and stuff, I don't know if we have any DNA or examples of what would be edited out or anything, but when we bring up these models and stuff and like take out this tiny little piece, and all of a sudden, like our society has been saying, oh, it's not ethical for us to do this. We shouldn't edit the DNA. But now this, researcher in China has kind of like broken the seal, so to speak, of people not doing it. Right. So it's like, it's now it's interesting because now there might be a kind of competition in race, especially with the future. I think, especially, again, this is very future thinking, but thinking about climate change and adaptation to hotter temperatures and things like that, like where we're going as a society. And it's just very interesting that this happened to have occurred, within very close to when you came on the show and stuff, and that we're talking about visualization of these small little parts and stuff, but we don't truly understand the implications. But it seems like we've shifted towards experimentation with deleting these different parts of the genome, and we don't know where it's going to go. Sounds like
it's interesting because like the DNA that we're learning how to edit, like that's our code, like it really is like a language, like a programming language that forms, it forms the proteins, which forms our tissues, which makes up everything that we are and how it all works together. And like it seems like, I don't know, like obviously we've gotten the ability to modify that code before we have a full understanding of all the implications, all the consequences. But like it's there's open questions too, like is editing our DNA, like how does that compare to just leaving it up to chance and letting any sort of negative natural consequence happen, whether it's good or bad, I guess. And also like I don't know, it seems, at least when we've talked about this before, we've kind of talked about how it kind of seems inevitable that we're going to modify ourselves. And like,
I think it's for me, it reminds me of parallels in like when they were trying to use like DDT to control mosquitoes, and so it's like we could use CRISPR to try to control the environment of our genes and stuff, and start selecting for certain things. But because we don't really have a clue of like the whole ecosystem, we're just starting to understand. We're just starting to understand how the brain really works, and so other about our microbiome, and now things that are in your microbiome can exist in your brain, and we're just like at the very start of this, really looking at this complex world that we live in. And so I feel like just like when we started to tinker with our environment, we sometimes there are unintended consequences that we don't understand. And I think that's where the concern is.
For sure, because it's just such a complex, just big, there's lots and lots of stuff in there that we can't all account for, which means we can't predict what's going to happen based on our, actions.
And it's a can of worms. So you don't maybe we'd have the ethics not to use it, like we don't want to use biological warfare, that's the stance of the U.S. not to use biological warfare. But if other countries perhaps start to like do genetic modifications to make people taller and smarter and whatever, I don't know.
It's competition. I know we're getting towards the end right now, but Kika, I see that you have a quick
just one comment on CRISPR, because it just like to me, CRISPR just seems like a faster way of selective breeding.
That's an interesting argument,
I think it's different. It's different than that, though.
Well, but we have been like selectively deciding which genes survive, like
and
even though we've been doing it directly.
I know CRISPR could run into the realm of like eugenics.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Definitely bring that back, but
it's just a hell of a lot easier than doing it by breeding. Like if you're gonna do eugenics, CRISPR is a hell of a lot better way to do it than having all the blonde kids bang each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, but it's like, I mean, look what
it as something
wolves, like you turn wolves into like corgis, basically. So
I mean, who wouldn't want that, honestly?
Yeah,
Corgis are
I wish
amazing,
my children had corgi fur. Yeah, be a lot better to pet,
Oh God, the implications of furries getting acquired in CRISPR.
Yes.
Oh God.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I think that is the biggest concern I think everybody has is like how are people going to use this for eugenics or for something other crazy thing? And then there are other people who say, well, we're all going towards the singularity and combining with computers and and like what if the computers figure out how to use CRISPR to create the perfect human? So I think right now
that's interesting.
that's what I'm really worried about is the robots and artificial intelligence using CRISPR on my grandchildren. That's what I'm worried about.
Wow. So I mean, what would that? So that would look like some kind of basically you have some kind of and it's interesting actually because technology like Facebook and other things like right now algorithms are very amorphous and it's like the black boxes. You have the input and then you have the output, and we assume like Facebook is showing us what we care about most, or are they actually showing us what a government wants to, the favored candidate to win. So it's interesting when you talk about this CRISPR and the AI and stuff. It's like, maybe we're going to be at a point where, you can put your baby's DNA or you can put them through a disease or a risk mitigation algorithm, quote unquote.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, the risk mitigation algorithm is deleting the parts of the genome that lead someone to be more obedient towards AI or like something. Yeah, something that's terrifying.
Yeah, so I think that's what we don't really understand is like, if you select for like somebody to be, smarter, then do they become like less creative or do they be,
right? Which is
I
what
don't
people
know.
say about evolution. We're kind of,
but I think that the
it.
real strength in evolution is the genetic diversity that we have in the world, and I think that
it is. But this is increasing. This is increasing diversity. So also, I'm Freeman as you with a comment.
Yes.
But I just want to add this one thing is that I think that with every type of evolution, it's always been that the newest evolved species come from a slightly less evolved species. So perhaps we've evolved to be able to develop the technology to edit genes to create the next level of evolution or something like that with technology. It's a very interesting paradigm to think about that we're continuing this process of evolution and that CRISPR is CRISPR could be looked back potentially upon as the cavemen discovering fire, so to speak. I mean, who knows? I mean, it might not be, it might be more dystopian, but it's just, yeah, these technologies are really powerful. But yeah, Freeman,
Yeah, I mean, all I just want to say is just like, I think it's sad that Doomsday Preppers was cancelled because we've got a new technology to face now, not just disease or nuclear war. That's it. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah.
It's like another level.
It is. It's another. It's going to be the source of many a sci-fi thriller. I think.
Yeah.
Also,
I've got a more philosophical question.
All right.
So I've been thinking about this a lot along more like evolutionary psychology. As far as like, let's say your genetic code, all right, your genetic code, this is what is it, like 3.4 billion process that DNA has been surviving to pass on and copy itself, right? 3.4 billion.
Yep.
So somehow your DNA would deep-seated in deep within, like below your like Sigmund Freud, like your ego, superego, and id, like below your primal state, your DNA wants to copy itself.
Yeah.
So I think one of the basis of the fear is, and it might be of like a very big, like deep primal fear, is that now if you introduce CRISPR to your child, how do you know that your DNA has copied itself and that's actually you surviving on?
Yeah. Okay, so can I just say, do you have? I mean, this is too personal. Do you have kids? Because I've got 2 kids, and they get like half your genes, but you don't really. It's not like you get to say, "Hey, I want you to have this gene and this gene. I definitely want you to have my hair and my sense of humor, my awesome dad sense of humor." They just kind of get. It's like a crapshoot. It's like you take a shotgun and like, boop. These are the genes you're getting.
But they're yours.
And then by the time you get down from like, parents to like, whatever you get down here, and now they got like, I mean, trying to draw any of your genes from that, it's just like, it's such a, I don't know. I think it's laughable when like passing on your genes, like as if they're, I don't know. I guess you do see like certain families, like certain characteristics that seems all the generations seem to have, but I don't know. It just seems like so random after. I don't know.
Popopo unfortunately has crashed, and she's trying to get back in right now, but I think some of the glitches of VRChat are leading us down. But yeah, do you have any final kind of thoughts to wrap us up here about like where do you think we're heading? Like, what do you think the future is of all this technology, of visualizing, of being able to do biovisualization? Like, yeah, where are we heading?
So yeah, to take a step back from the curve on the on CRISPR and all that. One last thing I want to say is that already CRISPR is there are other things that might do CRISPR better than CRISPR does, and also CRISPR might actually have some really negative side effects that it might damage the DNA in other ways. So it's all very new technology. I don't think anybody really understands how it works completely, but at the same time, it's a Pandora's box is kind of being opened. So we'll see where that all ends up. But I guarantee when the scientists talk about CRISPR to each other and when they communicate it to the science, that's where they need like people to help visualize it and create the graphics and make it easy to understand. And I think that that's what I really like to do in my role. And I really like to do it in an open source way and where you can share the 3D models. That's why I really like that the work that Kristen's doing. In fact, she might be good like as a potential future speaker, maybe if we could like bring in some more models and make some of that available.
That'd be great.
And also, yeah, if anybody's if you're ever if anybody has any questions at a later time that they want to ask me or anything, feel free to reach out. I give you my email and all that stuff in the notes and whatnot. It's Jeremy Swan, actually just jeremy.swan@gmail.com. And also, check out the NIH 3D Print Exchange. If you also want 3D models, like some of the things that we're showing here today, you can just go to the 3D Print Exchange and download 3D printable models. But and it could be small molecules like caffeine or nicotine or benzene or carbon rings or I don't know. There's any kind of model you can think of. You can actually get through that, and then you can bring them into Blender or
damn it.
America's Got Talent.
library, and that's 3D print, and this better work. 3D print.
But the blue is nitro, nitrogen.
It is nitrogen.
Is the blue nitrogen?
The blue is nitrogen, yes. And the red should be oxygen.
All right.
Nice.
We need to.
Well,
or are there just like delocalized electrons here?
So
Actually,
you can download them all in Blender format or in X3D. Yeah. And yeah, X3D is pretty cool too.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, for coming on to the show
Hey,
and
thank
everything.
you.
Yeah, it's
High five.
awesome. Fist bump. Yes. But yeah, well, I think we should, yeah, and thank you everyone for coming. Yeah, that was really cool.
Thanks.
It's really awesome to have the show and tell, and Popo was amazing by getting all this stuff in here, so I'm really
Yeah,
sad
you guys
that
are awesome.
crashed.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to meet you guys.
So we take
I'll
a
be
group
back
pic.
every time. Thanks so much. Hey.
Yeah, so we take a group picture, and I
How's it
think
going?
that normally do
What's
it
up,
on
Jeremy?
stage, but I think we
Yeah.
should do it with this molecule or something in the background.
Hi, Boo Boo! Oh man, I got the blue screen death. It was very scary.
Oh no! Oh my god!
Yeah, that was fun.
So we just finished up, and we're gonna take a group picture. And I was thinking we could take it with the molecule or something.
Yes.
I don't know.
I knew I should have put in something to make it stop rotating. We'll just get a few pictures.
Where's that stand?
We can just stand
We could
like
just
mid
use.
coaster.
Who's a good
Where
boy?
should we?
We could just use one of the stationary molecules.
Oh, am I a good boy?
Oh yeah, there is it. Is there a stationary molecule?
Okay,
I'm
wait,
gonna
we
stay in
have
the
to
middle.
wait for it to spin around.
Does it stick my hand? I did.
Caffeine.
Oh.
Normally,
Blue, 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 blue.
normally I have the caffeine in me, and now I'm in the caffeine.
Yay!
We should just do two, one with and without.
Yay! What should we say on 3, Jeremy?
Caffeine!
Caffeine, yeah.
I'm actually let me get onto the edge.
No
here.
decaffeinated.
I don't want to cover anyone with bones.
Yay!
Oh,
Let
yeah.
us know one, Ghoster.
Hurry up before anybody gets disconnected.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Caffeine!
Caffeine!
Chocolate. We missed one.
Yay!
Doesn't think I think the
Yay! Well, thanks, Jeremy. That was
Awesome.
Oh,
Yeah,
Thank you so
very
much.
good.
That was really fun. Yeah.
Welcome.
Oh, you just got bored?
Thanks for making it all happen.
Everybody's in there.
So cool, man.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Just got
Yeah,
That was really fun.
You did it. This is really cool to have
I'm
the
glad
3D
I'm
model.
glad
Oh my
Yeah.
god. It really,
So
really
awesome.
was really like.
That was fun.
Yeah, what a
game.
How was Endgame?
Awesome, thanks.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
guys have speakers in the
Interesting. It was
future,
full of
I'm sure I can
science.
come up with some 3D models for you to use. It's like
That's surprising.
I have like access to all kinds of stuff, so let me know. Like, oh, we have a hand files just coming. And if you're into bugs and stuff, I actually did this giant mock poster.
Close enough.